Welcome back to the part 2 of this video. If you missed the part 1, do well to watch it. The sun rose red, as if the heavens themselves mourned with Obinna. His compound was silent, except for the faint whimpering of his children. Nneka's body, wrapped in white cloth, lay on the mat in the inner room. Her presence was heavy, yet she was gone. Obinna sat outside, head buried in his palms, when a crowd approached. At the front was Okechukwu, his face stern, his voice booming like a war drum. Behind him came elders, kinsmen, and women carrying baskets of kola nut and palm wine. "Obinna," Okechukwu began, his voice sharp. "Today we settle what you left unsettled. My sister cannot go to her grave as your wife unless you marry her properly. Do you hear me?" The crowd murmured in agreement. Some faces showed pity, others only cold judgment. Obinna's heart pounded. "But she is gone," he said weakly. "How can I marry the dead?" Elder Madwagwu, his gray beard shaking as he spoke, raised a hand for silence. "Custom is custom. Whether living or dead, a woman's bride price must be paid in full before she belongs to her husband. If not, she returns to her father's house. Do you want Nneka buried as a stranger in your eyes, and your children called bastards?" The word bastards sliced Obinna's chest. His children, his very blood, would be cast aside if he refused. "What must I do?" he asked, his voice breaking. Okechukwu pulled out a folded list, old and yellowed with time. It was the same list Obinna had received years ago when he first asked for Nneka's hand. He began to read aloud. 2 goats, 25 tubers of yam, 4 jars of palm wine, 1 she-goat with her young, wrappers for the mother, money for the father, kola nut, and bride price in cowries. Each item was a stone dropped into Obinna's soul. He was poor. His farm barely fed his family, yet now he was expected to produce wealth to marry a corpse. Still, what choice did he have? "I will find them," he whispered. The next days were filled with shame. Obinna moved from compound to compound, begging for loans, offering to work his hands to the bone. Some helped him out of pity, others mocked him. "So now you want to marry the dead?" One man sneered. "Why didn't you finish your duty when she was alive?" When at last he gathered enough, the goats bleeding in rope, the yams piled like graves, the jars of palm wine sweating in the sun, Obinna carried them to Okafor's compound. There, under the gaze of elders, kinsmen, and the curious eyes of villagers, the ceremony began. Nneka's body was brought out, wrapped tightly, her face uncovered. Her skin was pale, her beauty now frozen. Women wailed, their voices rising like the ululation of spirits. "Obinna," Elder Madwagwu intoned, "kneel before your bride." With trembling knees, Obinna knelt. His tears fell on the dust, mixing with the blood of the goat slaughtered for the ritual. "You are to marry her now, as tradition demands. Place the bride price before her." Obinna placed the cowries and money at Nneka's feet. The goats bleated, the yams stood tall, the jars of wine glistened. He bowed low. Then Okechukwu lifted his sister's cold hand and dropped it into Obinna's trembling palms. The chill ran through him like lightning. "From this day," the elder declared, "you are husband to Nneka, not only in life, but in death. You have paid the debt. The ancestors are witnesses." A wail rose from the women. Some wept in sorrow, others shook their heads in disbelief. Obinna clutched Nneka's cold hand, his chest breaking. It was not a wedding. It was a funeral dressed in shame. And as he knelt there, marrying the dead, he felt the weight of the earth pressing on him, heavier than any bride price could ever be. The air in Umuaka was heavy that night, as if the spirits themselves leaned closer to watch what was about to unfold. The moon hid behind clouds, and only the flickering light of palm oil lamps cast shadows on the gathering. In the courtyard of Okafor's compound, Nneka's body lay on a raffia mat, dressed in the coral beads and wrapper of a bride. Her face was powdered with white chalk, her lips tinted with camwood. She looked like a bride prepared for her husband, except her chest no longer rose with breath. The villagers gathered in a wide circle. Some came out of duty, others out of curiosity, and many out of fear. Children peeked from behind their mothers' wrappers, wide-eyed. Women murmured, "Chineke ekwela," God forbid. Men shook their heads, whispering, "This is the shame that comes when tradition is ignored." Obinna stood at the center, a hollow man. His eyes were sunken, his wrapper loose around his waist, his feet dusty from days of running between compounds. He had paid the price, but the ritual was not yet complete. Elder Madwagwu, the oldest voice of the land, stepped forward with a staff carved from iroko. His voice was deep, steady, and filled with the weight of centuries. "Tonight," he said, "we marry the dead to the living, so that the balance of tradition is restored. Without this, Nneka will wander the spirit world as a maiden, and Obinna's children will bear no name. With this, she becomes both wife and ancestor." 2 women carried a calabash of palm wine and placed it before Nneka's body. Okechukwu, her brother, broke a kola nut and placed the pieces at her feet. A goat bleated. Its throat quickly slit, blood soaking the ground beside her mat. Then came the most haunting part. "Obinna," Elder Madwagwu commanded, "take the wine, kneel before your bride, and ask her hand in marriage as you should have done fully years ago." Obinna's hands shook as he lifted the calabash. He knelt before Nneka's lifeless form, his tears falling into the wine. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Nneka, my wife, my love, forgive me. I take you now, even in death." He poured the wine onto the earth, then touched it to her cold lips. The women wailed louder, some covering their eyes. The men looked away, muttering that it was both sacred and shameful. Then Okechukwu, his face hard, took Nneka's hand once more and placed it in Obinna's. Her fingers were stiff, but Obinna held them as if warmth might return. "With this," Elder Madwagwu declared, "you are now joined, bound before the ancestors and the living. Death has not broken what was left incomplete." The drums began to beat, not in joy, but in solemn rhythm. The marriage songs that once welcomed brides were sung, but their notes were heavy, dragging like chains. "Obinna," one elder said, "you must dance with your wife. Even the dead deserve the honor of marriage rites." Obinna's heart shattered, yet he obeyed. He rose, lifting Nneka's body with trembling arms. She was light now, too light, her head lolling against his chest. He swayed to the drumbeat, carrying her in a slow, broken dance. The crowd gasped, some turning away, others weeping. As he moved, he whispered into her ear, words no one else could hear. "If love alone were enough, you would still be here." When the dance ended, Nneka was laid back onto the mat. The rituals were complete. Obinna had married his wife in death, paying the debt that had haunted him for years. But instead of relief, only emptiness filled him. The ancestors might be satisfied, the villagers might nod, but his heart was torn in ways no ritual could mend. And so, the night ended with ululations that were neither fully of joy nor fully of mourning. It was something in between, something that carried the weight of both love and shame. The compound was unusually quiet that morning. The rooster had crowed, the sun had stretched its golden fingers over the thatched rooftops, but the people of Umuaka moved about with whispers and hushed steps, as though a heavy curse hung in the air. News of Nneka's sudden death had traveled beyond the hills, and mourners from neighboring villages poured in like a flood. Yet, for all the wailing and dirges, there was something darker beneath the sorrow, an unspoken knowledge of what must come next. Obinna sat at the edge of his obi, his hands trembling as he clutched his head. He had not eaten since the night before, nor had he spoken to anyone beyond single words. His eyes were bloodshot, swollen from crying, though no tears could wash away the dread sitting heavily on his heart. He replayed her last words in his mind, those whispered promises of life together, of a future with children laughing in the compound. Now, all of that was shattered like a clay pot dropped on stone. But grief was not his only burden. Fear was. He knew the custom of Umuaka, a custom older than memory itself. If a man had not completed the bride price of his wife before her death, he must marry her corpse. Only then could she be buried in honor. Only then would her spirit rest. The elders arrived before midday, their red caps glinting under the sun. At their head was Okori, the oldest man in the village, a figure whose voice carried the weight of generations. Behind him walked women of the Umuada, their wrappers tied tightly as if ready for battle, their eyes sharp and unyielding. "Obinna," Okori began, his tone slow, deliberate, as though each word were carved in stone. "You are a man, but today you are also a child before our tradition. Nneka was not yours to keep fully. You took her into your home. You enjoyed her laughter. You warmed yourself by her love. But you did not finish what the gods require." Obinna fell to his knees, his voice breaking. "I was preparing, Father. The farm was slow to yield, and debts tied my hands. I had promised her people." Okori lifted a hand, silencing him. "Promises do not feed the ancestors. The kola nut that is not broken cannot bless a union. You must marry her now, Obinna, not as you wished in life, but as the spirits demand in death." Gasps and murmurs rippled among the mourners. The women of the Umuada began to sing a low, haunting song, their voices rising and falling like the wind through the palm trees. It was a song of unfinished unions, of debts unpaid, of spirits left wandering. Obinna's chest tightened. He wanted to scream, to curse, to run into the forest and never return. But when he glanced at Nneka's lifeless body laid out in the room, her skin pale, her beauty dimmed but not erased, he felt his soul collapse. The idea of marrying her corpse was unbearable, yet the thought of her restless spirit haunting him, forever denied peace, was worse. He looked up at the elders, his voice shaking. "What must I do?" Okori's gaze was steady, merciless. "At sunset, when the shadows grow long, you will kneel before her body. The bride price must be completed in the presence of her family, the Umuada, and the spirits. Then you will be bound to her, and only then will she be given back to the earth." A heavy silence followed. Obinna's breath caught in his throat. The words felt like a death sentence carved into his very bones. Sunset was only hours away. And as the women's song grew louder, carrying a sorrowful rhythm that seemed to pierce his soul, Obinna realized that the worst was yet to come. The orange sun was sinking into the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of fire. Drums began to beat slowly in the heart of Umuaka, a sound that carried both finality and fear. Obinna stood in the middle of the compound, his knees weak, sweat rolling down his forehead even as the evening breeze cooled the land. The villagers gathered in a wide circle, whispering and watching. Some pitied him, others only cared for the custom that bound them all. Nneka's body lay on a bamboo stretcher, her face covered with a white cloth, her form wrapped in a delicate wrapper her mother had woven years ago. The Umuaka stood close, their eyes sharp like blades. Behind them, Nneka's family waited, their faces carved with grief and silent anger. "Bring the palm wine," Okori, the eldest elder, commanded. His voice boomed over the crowd. A young man brought forth a calabash of fresh palm wine, its frothy top bubbling as if alive. A plate of kola nuts was set on the ground beside it, alongside cowries and bundles of naira notes, the last part of the bride price Obinna had struggled to gather with the help of his kinsmen. Obinna's hands trembled as he picked up the items. Every eye was on him, every whisper biting into his skin. He wanted to cry, to scream, to ask why fate had chosen this path for him. But he knew there was no escape. Kneel before her, Obinna fell to his knees, sobbing openly now. The drums quickened, the Umuaka began their dirge-like chants, and the fire of the torches flickered around him. He touched the earth with his forehead 3 times, the ultimate sign of surrender. "I, Obinna," his broken voice carried through the night, "take you, Nneka, as my wife before the spirits and ancestors. Though death has stolen you, tradition binds us." The crowd wailed. Some women covered their faces with cloths, unable to watch. The Umuaka clapped their hands, sealing the union. Nneka was now his wife, even in death. The burial rites began immediately after. Her body, now considered properly married, was dressed in coral beads and fine cloth, carried by singing maidens to her grave. Obinna followed like a shadow, his soul hollow. When the earth finally covered her, he felt as if a part of him had been buried too. The night fell silent, save for the distant hoot of an owl. Obinna remained at the graveside long after the crowd had left, staring at the mound of earth that separated him from the woman he loved. He had married her, yes, but not as he had dreamed. Should a man be forced to marry a corpse simply because bride price was not fully paid? Should love and death be chained by money and tradition? And so, dear people, I ask you, do you support this Igbo practice, or should love and burial be freed from such a custom? Comment below and subscribe for more.